I will not be going through the Jordan River with you, says Moses to Israel. I will not have the privilege of entering the land that God has promised. But God has told me to sing you a song, and you must remember this song. You must sing it for the rest of your life. You must sing it in danger, in crisis. You must sing it at times when God seems far away. And he sings this song in Deuteronomy 32, and it takes 43 verses. And it's a song about the greatness of God. It's a song about the faithfulness of God. It's a song about God is the rock, and all his works are perfect. He is a just God. It is a reminder that Israel has not been faithful, but God has been faithful. Remember your songs. And then we fast forward to the end of the story, and John has his revelation, and he begins to record it. And he says in chapter 15, I saw them there. They were singing. They were all singing. They were singing around the throne of God. What were they singing? John says they were singing the song of Moses. No kidding. And they were singing the song of the Lamb. And it turns out to be the same song. And he actually gives us the words in Revelation 15. So what does it mean to sing the song of Moses and the Lamb? Great and marvelous are your deeds, Lord God Almighty. Just and true are your ways, King of the ages. Who will not fear you, O Lord, and bring glory to your name? For you alone are holy. All nations will come and worship before you, for your righteous acts have been revealed. Samuel Stinnett, a London preacher, comes along many years later in 1787, and he writes a great hymn, On Jordan's stormy banks I stand and cast a wishful eye to Canaan's fair and happy land where my possessions lie. And it has that refrain, we will sing the song of Moses and the Lamb by and by, and dwell with Jesus evermore. And when I take people to kneel at Samuel Stinnett's grave in Bunhill Fields, London, which I've done many times, we can turn when we're standing there at Stinnett's grave and singing his song, and we can see the grave of John Bunyun, who wrote Pilgrims Progress. Do you remember Pilgrims Progress? It's been translated into over 200 languages. It's never been out of print for over 3 centuries. The main character, every man, is named Christian, and it's the story of his journey. Christian is going from the city of destruction to the celestial city. His wife does not go with him. His children do not go with him. And out of John Bunyun's imagination, sitting for 12 years in Bedford jail, imprisoned because of his faith in Christ, he writes Pilgrims Progress. And he tells this story of all these characters that meet Christian, and of the places he goes, like Vanity Fair, and all the lust of Vanity Fair. And he knows he's got to get out of Vanity Fair, but he finds a friend there, Hopeful. And Hopeful becomes his partner in the rest of the journey. They travel together. And as they travel, they get off the beaten path. They take a bypath. They think it's a shortcut. It's not. And they spend a night sleeping in the field outside a castle. It turns out that it's Doubting Castle. Have you ever spent time in Doubting Castle? It's inhabited by a giant. And the giant's name is, of course, Despair. And the giant comes the next morning, and he grabs them, and he imprisons them in Doubting Castle. And he says to them, you have no hope, kill yourselves. He shows them the bones of all the people who have died in Doubting Castle. And he beats them. He imprisons them, and he beats them on Thursday. And he beats them even harder on Friday. And on Saturday, they don't see how they can go on any longer. They have been beaten and tortured and punished. But as Saturday night ends, and as we move past midnight, and as we come into the Lord's Day, out of John Bunyun's imagination, he has Christian feeling up around his shirt, and he feels a key in his pocket, and he pulls out the key, and he reads that it is the key called promise. And he begins to fall back on the promises of God. And he and Hopeful make their way to the door, and they try the key, and it fits. And they open the door, and the sunshine comes in, and they escape from Doubting Castle, depending on the promises of God. And they make their way down the road, and they go through the valley of the shadow of death. And finally they come to the Jordan. And oh, it's not the Jordan you've been to in your Holy Land tours. You've got to let your imagination go. It's a raging torrent. It's wide. You can't tell how deep it is. And they're terrified at the thought of crossing it. And they look for every other option. They go up and down looking for a bridge. There's no other option. They got to go over the river. And you've got to die, and I've got to die. And we know this metaphor. We cross the Jordan. We all die. And it's hard. But John Kent is sitting out there in Western England, in Devon, in 1803, and he's reading the Song of Moses, but he's got Pilgrims Progress with him. And you just sang it. He writes, on Zion's glorious summit, that's the other side of the river, on Zion's glorious summit stood a numerous host. What do we know about this numerous host singing around the throne of God? On Zion's glorious summit stood a numerous host redeemed by blood. That's what set them apart. They had washed their robes in the blood of the Lamb. On Zion's glorious summit stood a numerous host redeemed by blood. They hymned their King with strains divine. I heard the song and strove to join. I began running. Christian and Hopeful get to the edge of the Jordan, and they can hear them singing, and they want to be with them, but they are terrified. Hopeful goes in first. Hopeful goes in, and then Christian follows, but Christian begins to sink, and he knows he'll never see Hopeful again. It's a terrifying moment. But then halfway across the river, the way Bunyan tells the story, Hopeful turns back, and he yells back to Christian, "Be of good cheer, my brother, for I feel the bottom, and it is sound." And he goes back, and he lifts Christian out of the water. He holds his chin above the water, and they make it. They make it all the way to the other side. I heard the song and strove to join. It was on January 26th. It was a Wednesday, 1927. And Margaret Gossip died. She wasn't even sick. It was so sudden. Her husband, Arthur John Gossip, was the preacher of Beech Grove Church. He was 52 years old. She was still in her 40s. He just wasn't prepared for it. I taught homiletics, the preparation and delivery of sermons, at Pepperdine for 19 years. Enjoyed it, but then turned it over to somebody who could teach it better, namely Ken Durham. But during those 19 years, I did one thing in every class. I acted out, I read the sermon that I said to them, I think is the most significant sermon of the 20th century. It's the sermon Arthur John Gossip preached the next time he got in the pulpit at Beech Grove after his wife suddenly and inexplicably died. Batsell Barrett Baxter liked that sermon too. We talked about it. And he wrote a book in 1974 based on the title of that sermon. That sermon was called, But When Life Tumbles In, What Then? And Batsell's book, When Life Tumbles In, was published by Baker Bookhouse in 1974. I went back there to Beech Grove. I guess we all do at some point, years ago. I said to the woman, you probably know why I'm here. I'm an American. I've read the sermon over and over. I even teach it. I would love to see the pulpit. She said, you're not the first and you won't be the last. I understand completely. Follow me. She took me into the sanctuary of the Beech Grove Church in Aberdeen, Scotland. She took me up on the stage to the pulpit. She said, I'll leave you alone with your thoughts. Take your time. She closed the door. And I thought of that sermon. I don't have time to read you the whole sermon, but I'll read you the last two paragraphs. Let's put this on the screen. He said to his sorrowing congregation, I don't think you need to be afraid of life. Our hearts are very frail, and there are places where the road is very steep and very lonely. But we have a wonderful God. And as Paul puts it, what can separate us from his love? Not death, he says immediately, pushing that aside at once as the most obvious of all impossibilities. And then Arthur John Gossip looks at this congregation. They're leaning now toward him. And this is his final words to them. No, not death. For standing in the roaring of the Jordan, cold to the heart with its dreadful chill, and very conscious of the terror of its rushing, I too, Arthur John Gossip, I too, like hopeful, can call back to you, my people, my church at Beech Grove. One day you're going to die, and I will call back to you when one day in your turn you will have to cross it. I will call back to you. And now, all of you, say it with me. Be of good cheer, my brother, for I feel the bottom, and it is sound. Thank God for the song of Moses and the song of the Lamb, and for John Bunyun writing Pilgrims Progress. And so, in the fading light of a Sunday afternoon, in 1886, Peter Billhorn, the worship minister, 21 years old, of the First Baptist Church in North Adams, Massachusetts, says to the preaching minister, Francis Rowley, who was 32 years old, if you would write a hymn, I'll write the music for it. Rowley laughed. He'd never written a hymn in his life. He never thought he could write a hymn. And if I'm not mistaken, he never wrote another one. But he went home that night. I've walked the road from the First Baptist Church down to what was 24 Church Street. All the numbering's different. Now it's 130. I stood outside and looked at that house and thought of Francis Rowley going in there on that Sunday night in 1886. He's going to give it a try, and he'll never write another one. But he writes, I will sing the wondrous story of the Christ who died for me, how he left his home in glory for the cross of Calvary. He actually wrote, can't we sing the song? Instead of I will sing, And he sent it to Ira Sankey, the song leader for Dwight L. Moody. And Sankey said, Francis, this is a good hymn. You just got one thing wrong here. You don't want to say, can't I? Or just sing it. Right, I will sing it. That was the only modest change. And Peter Bilhorn wrote the music. And the song has been in all of our books for a long time. There are a lot of verses to it. Most of our hymnals have all 5. In a moment, I want you to sing the first verse, and then we'll jump to 5. You ever been in a group of people and you're talking about what are your favorite lines in a song, and you're just sitting around, I love this line, and I usually fall back here. He gets to the end of his story. I will sing the wondrous story. And then he answers the question that we want answered. That key, the promises of God. How long will he keep us, this God? How long will he protect us? How long will he go with us? And then, in a moment of sheer luminosity and inspiration, Francis Raleigh, who'd never written anything this good in his life and never did again, writes, he will keep me till the river. Of course he will. That's where it ends. He will keep me till the river rolls its waters at my feet. Then he'll bear me safely over where my loved ones, where the loved ones I shall meet. I'd love that to be sung at my funeral. That's the promise. That's the key that opens Doubting Castle. That's the key that makes us sing the song of Moses and the Lamb. I just have one message today. Remember your songs. As you try to navigate the troubled waters of this secular world, keep singing. Remember your songs. Remember that God is faithful. Remember that God is great. And he has promised to keep us till the river rolls its waters at our feet. Jeremy's going to lead us in 1 and 5 with the praise team. Let's all stand and sing our faith and remember our songs.
I will sing the wondrous story of the Christ who died for me, and how he left his home in glory for the cross of Calvary. Yes, I'll sing the wondrous story of the Christ who died for me. Sing it with the saints in glory, gathered by the crystal sea. And he will keep me till the river rolls its waters at my feet. Then he'll bear me safely over where the I shall be. Yes, I'll sing the wondrous story of the Christ who died for me. Sing it with the saints in glory, gathered by the crystal sea. Let's sing the chorus again. Yes, I'll sing the wondrous story of the Christ who died for me. Sing it with the saints in glory, gathered by the crystal sea.
Please be seated. You know that I love to go to where the hymns were written, and 1986, we made our way to Penticellin in south central Wales to see where the poet laureate, William Williams, wrote, "Guide me, O thou great Jehovah, pilgrim through this barren land." And especially the third verse, "When I tread the verge of Jordan, bid my anxious fears subside." Where is that from? Pilgrims Progress. William Williams is sitting in that table in his dining room, and he's got the Song of Moses and the Song of the Lamb, but he's got Pilgrim's Progress. "Bid my anxious fears subside. Be of good cheer, my brother. My feet have touched the bottom, and it is sound." We got to the old house. This is centuries later. He wrote it in the 1700s. I got out of the car just to take a picture. I didn't want to bother anybody. Came over to the side, and she came out the front door. Oh, my cover has been blown. 13 years old, hands on hips, looking at me. I said, "I just wanted to take a picture. We won't be here long." She said, "That's not a very good place." Well, where would a good place be? Well, everybody takes it over here. So I went over on that hill and I said, "Well, you're right. The house looks wonderful. I'll take my picture here." And I did. And it dawned on me. I said, "Are you a Williams? Does the family still live here 300 years later?" And she said, "Yes." Like, what a dumb question. Why would we give up our house? It's our home. It's the Williams house. I said, "Do you happen to know what generation you are?" Oh, I still remember how she straightened her shoulders. "7, she said. "I'm generation 7 from William Williams." And the moment she said that, generation 6 walked out the front door. She came out and she was going, "Come on in the house. Come on in." And I said, "Oh, no, we didn't mean to bother. We just wanted to pick. Come on in the house." Now we're going in the house. And now we're in the room where William Williams wrote, "Guide me, O thou great Jehovah." And there's generation 5. Grandma's sitting there, and she's doing some knitting over there. And before long, we're having tea and scones, and we're with the Williams family. This came back to me when I watched the royal wedding. Did you watch it? And Harry only picked the one song he was concerned about was this one. It was sung at his mother's funeral. They sang it at Diana's funeral. And Will and Kate had chosen it. They chose it to sing at their wedding. So Harry said, "This is the song that binds the royal family together. We sang this at our mother's funeral, and my brother, I want this at the end. When we're ready to march out, I want you marching out on, 'Guide me, O thou great Jehovah, pilgrim through this barren land. I am weak, but you are mighty.'" And that great third verse, "When we tread the verge of Jordan, bid my anxious fears subside." That's what they were singing as they came out of Windsor at the St. George's Chapel there at Windsor. It's a great old song. And we thank God for John Bunyun's imagination and the fears when we get to death and we've got to die. Bid my anxious fears subside. And then, on Zion's glorious summit stood a numerous host redeemed by blood. They hymned their King with strains divine. I heard the song and strove to join. Let's sing as we close verses 1 and 3. Let's remain seated and let Jeremy come up and lead it and the praise team sing it with us. Let's sing 1 and 3 as we sing our faith and we remember our songs.